Then nothing came to Fox Hollow on a cloudy fall day. Felix noticed it standing quietly in the hallway next to the umbrella stand. But it didn't seem to be causing any trouble, so he thought nothing of it. A week later, it had moved to the living room. It sat there on the far end of the couch watching him. He thought it was watching him anyways. He ate his microwave dinner and watched, you guessed it. After a while, Felix grew accustomed to having it around. It was familiar, a comforting presence to dampen the loneliness that had been with him ever since Lenore left. He decided to name it. "Good morning, Christopher," he would announce as he spread open the curtains each day. "Hand me that spare light bulb, Christopher," he'd call from the kitchen while replacing the burned-out globe. "That's the third bulb to go out this week. Isn't it funny how these things happen all at once?" Christopher must have found it amusing because a shiver of silent laughter traveled through his ill-defined form. When Felix's sister, Ruth, came to check on him, as she did once a fortnight, Felix took Christopher to the closet and covered him with an old sheet. During her visit, he glanced nervously at the closet, dreading the moment that Christopher might emerge and shuffle back to his place on the couch. How would he explain his new house guest to his sister? But Christopher stayed put, and not so much as a whisper came from behind the closet door. Still, Felix could not follow the thread of their conversation. He nodded in agreement when he should have been shaking his head in disgust. He stared blankly when he should have chuckled at an anecdote and went to refill Ruth's teacup when it was still full and steaming. "Are you all right, Felix?" she asked him, frowning with concern. He assured her that he was, that it was nothing, that he simply hadn't been sleeping well lately, which was the truth. "It's from being alone in this big house," she told him. "It's not healthy. You should get out more and meet some people. Find yourself a good woman. It's been long enough. You know, there's someone I work with, Mary. I'll give her your number." He agreed with her, of course. Yes, it was time to move on. True, he wasn't getting any younger. This house, with its many empty bedrooms, was crying out to be filled with the pitter-patter of little footsteps. Felix tried to hide his relief when an hour and a half later Ruth finally stood up to leave. But to his horror, as they walked past his bedroom, she stopped and turned to face the closet. "Oh, before I forget, do you still have Mom's old quilts in here? I've been meaning to bring them home for the kids' beds. It's getting so cold already." Before he could think of an excuse to stop her, she had flung the door wide and was staring into the closet. "Now let's see," she began. "Oh!" Felix's mouth went dry as his sister's frowning face reappeared. "The bulb in here needs replacing. Did you know?" "Oh," was all he could manage. "Ah, here they are." She emerged with an armful of quilts and kicked the door closed behind her. "Make sure you're keeping warm, too." As the weeks passed, Felix and Christopher became more comfortable with each other. Sometimes Christopher would follow Felix from one room to another, and he was always waiting by the umbrella stand in the hall when Felix came home from work. And was it his imagination, or was Christopher getting bigger? When he'd first arrived, he'd stood no taller than the umbrella handles. But now he was past Felix's waist. Not only that, but his form was becoming clearer. The suggestion of limbs now had long, defined fingers that drooped to the floor. "Good morning, Christopher," Felix said, pulling back the living room curtains. Christopher cocked his head. "Looks like it's going to be a fine day for a change," he announced as he moved to the kitchen to open the blinds and boil the kettle. There came a gentle swishing sound from the next room. When Felix returned to the living room, he found it dark, the curtains drawn tightly closed, and Christopher was sitting silently on the couch. "Very funny," he chuckled, pulling back the curtains a second time. Christopher stared at him for a moment, and then he stood and walked out of the room. Sounds like the chiming of a clock or the ringing of a doorbell seemed to bother Christopher. He would shiver violently and splay his long fingers. One evening, Felix received a phone call from Mary, the woman that Ruth worked with. She was softly spoken, shy, but sounded excited to speak with him. "Ruth tells me you work at the bank." Yes, I've been a teller there for 19 years. "Oh, I must have seen you there. I'm sure. Oh, it sounds so exciting. Have you ever been robbed?" "No," Felix admitted, partly wishing that he had, although one of my colleagues was charged with defrauding the accounts of some elderly customers. Christopher appeared from around the corner and was inching toward him, creaking softly, his fingers tapping along the wall. "How awful," Mary said. "Well, yes, I suppose it was." Mary giggled. "I'm really enjoying talking to you, Felix. Perhaps we could talk some more over dinner one evening?" Christopher stood up, peering up at Felix, slowly twisting the telephone cord around his fingers. "I would like that very much. How about this Friday?" Mary did not reply. "Mary? Hello?" As Christopher slunk back around the corner into the darkened living room, Felix followed the cord leading from the phone to the wall. It had been severed cleanly an inch from the wall. Felix no longer greeted Christopher each morning. He left the living room curtains closed, the way Christopher preferred it. Some days he was unable to go to work because Christopher stood by the door, bearing inky black teeth that Felix didn't realize he had. They were now of equal height, but while Christopher swelled with dark authority, Felix withdrew, retreating inside himself to a place that seemed to have diminished almost to nothing. When Ruth visited to demand an explanation for why he'd hung up on Mary, Felix wouldn't open the door all the way. Peering into the gloom at her brother's wan, frightened face, she knew then that something was deeply wrong. "It's nothing," Felix said, and he closed the door. That night, as he tossed and moaned in fitful sleep, the nothing stood beside his bed. It was time. It ran a finger slowly down, slicing open the man's body, and with a shiver of anticipation, climbed inside.